What's up, y'all? It's me, Andrew Prometheus. Haven't made a video in a while. I haven't had a reason to. But this felt worth talking about. Before we get started today, I finished my chest tattoo, you may notice. Dragon, pretty excited about it. I'll show you a close-up if you want to see. See what I mean? Yeah. Yes, sir. In my cup today, I got a caramel latte. I try not to drink too much coffee these days. Doesn't take much, but a little sip here and there I don't mind. Even though I do notice that I digest green tea a little cleaner. So I have been drinking more green tea, but today I had a little coffee. But the main topic of discussion today will be what to expect and some tips on how to quit smoking weed or eating THC products if you've been doing it a lot for a long time. Now, I'll be honest with you, like many of my habits over the years, when I was getting high or getting fucked up, it got worse over time. It escalated over time, right? I didn't start out by smoking the amount of strong weed that I finished with. But what I will say is where it was at kind of towards the end. And you can imagine it ramped up over time. So when I was at my peak consumption, because this is relevant, I was smoking about $400 or $500 worth of medical marijuana a week. And I would smoke and I would eat it. So I was smoking probably about a quarter a day of 30% plus testing THC weed. And I was eating a lot. I was eating grams in THC in edibles, either throughout the day or before bed was usually when I would eat the edibles. And that's a high consumption amount. Some people may smoke more, some people may smoke less. But I think it's relevant because the more you consume, the harder it's going to be when you try to quit, without a doubt. What's up, buddy? My cat's around. But I want to explain to you my experience, some of the challenges I faced, some of the things that helped me while I was trying to come off of weed. And hopefully this can help you out if you're interested in it, considering doing it, or within the first couple days or weeks and struggling a little bit. So the first thing I'll say is it took me about 7 weeks to really feel normal, right? And at first that was a little intimidating because my research said it would take about that long. And that seems like a really long time. But I can tell you what it did was it kind of got worse, peaked right about at the middle, right around the 3rd week, and then it got better. So managing something like this one day at a time is the only way that I was really able to do it. So I had a lot of fun actually counting the days, watching the number go up, watching my first day, my first week, my first month go by. But you might not want to do that. I noticed that me personally, going to NA meetings did not help me personally. I tried a few of them out. They work really well for some of my friends who came off of narcotics. But I personally did not have a good experience with that. So I did not go back, and that's not a part of my sobriety. No disrespect to people who do get something out of that, right? But I noticed right off the bat, I needed to set a specific wake-up time and a specific bedtime because it was very difficult for me to fall asleep at night. That was one of the first challenges that I ran into, was falling asleep at night. In hindsight, I kind of used to smoke and eat edibles to put myself to sleep. And without that, I found it very difficult to sleep at night. So if I hit 2 workouts over the span of the day and I woke up nice and early, it was much easier for me to fall asleep at night. And I noticed that was really crucial because that would set me up on the next day for success. And the next thing I'll say is, for whatever reason, I had some pretty serious anger and anxiety to deal with, because I think, marijuana, weed used to calm me down quite a bit. And for whatever reason, as soon as the sun went down and it became nighttime, those things would get worse. So at night, it would get worse for a little bit at first. And I can say now I'm about 70 days clean, completely sober. And now I can be up at night, I can be up during the daytime, whatever it's got to be. So that was temporary. But there were some traumatic memories waiting for me. There were some things I had to confront in my life that maybe I was hiding from. But that happened organically and naturally. I definitely started having some pretty intense, extreme fever dream type nightmares where they were very confusing and very, violent sometimes, and aggressive and sexual and all those things. And then I hit a point where my dreams did normalize out a little bit as well. And now I have dreams every night, but they're not bothering me or upsetting me. You know what I mean? Like, they're a little weird sometimes, they're a little intense. I've been lucid dreaming again within the last couple weeks. I've been in a dream, realized I was in a dream, and used the powers to kind of morph and change the direction or the setting of that dream, which I hadn't experienced in probably 25 years. The last lucid dreams I had, I was 6 or 7 years old. So lucid dreaming again has been a very positive experience. I've enjoyed that a lot. I think that shows some type of movement or growth happening in my mind. And honestly, once you get past that first kind of hump, all the money that I was spending on weed, now I can do whatever I want with. I realized in hindsight I would spend most of my free time sitting around and smoking weed, or packing bowls or cleaning bowls, or ashing bowls, or most of my time was put towards that habit and that behavior. So at first I had to kind of figure out what to do with all this extra time and money, which wasn't a bad problem to have. You know what I mean? I noticed right off the bat I was eating more. I thought my appetite would go down because there's the whole munchies stereotype, but honestly, my appetite went through the roof. I was able to eat a lot more, and I actually had the money to feed myself cleanly and put good food in my body and follow a more rigorous, planned out eating program. So that was all very positive for me. I think it's worth mentioning that I came off of weed and steroids at the same time. So I think the very first week, especially, I was kind of dealing with both. But in hindsight, I took them both for similar reasons. So that sense of confidence, that chemically induced false sense of confidence that I got from steroids, was comparable to, I think, why a lot of people drink alcohol before they engage in social settings. There's a lot of alcoholism that it comes from lack of confidence or insecurity. And I do think that was a big reason of why I took steroids, was for that feeling of confidence, right? And then I was surprised to see that I have more comfort and confidence now that I'm not on that drug than I did when I was on it. But for the same reason, I was very uncomfortable for some reason, socially, at the grocery store, at the gym, right? And so I would smoke weed to then go and feel comfortable in those places. And at first, there might have been a little discomfort. I feel like for the first couple days, I had to relearn how to drive my car. I had to relearn certain routes to certain places because I couldn't remember how to get there or remember how to get back because my state of consciousness had shifted. And memories are very linked to your states of consciousness. But the thing that I found that was really wonderful was as soon as I relearned it, I didn't lose it. So when I was smoking weed all the time and getting high all the time, it's kind of like in that movie Men in Black when they shine the light in your face and you get a memory wipe. So I wasn't retaining a lot of things the way that I can now. Like I could read a book and remember it very clearly. I don't have to use the GPS to get everywhere like I used to when I was smoking weed all the time. I feel more in control and conscious and less on autopilot. But a good way to describe it early on is if you really quit weed, you have more horsepower. So if you're used to driving, no disrespect if this is your car, but if you're used to driving a Honda Accord and then you get behind the wheel of a Ferrari, you're going to have to learn the new gas pedal. You're going to have to learn the new steering, or you're just going to crash into shit, right? But the whole point is your body is like a Ferrari or a supercar or a hypercar when you don't put bullshit into it. And you'll notice that the fine-tuned bioengineering of whatever the human being is, you're more adaptive, you're more responsive, you're more able to adapt and respond to stimulus. As soon as I kind of relearned my car and relearned driving, I was better at driving than I ever was when I was getting high all the time. I'm better at things now than I was, and that creates not a false sense of confidence, but a real type of confidence where I actually know I can handle certain things. You know what I mean? So, not to get too off track, but setting that bedtime, that wake up time, those things helped a lot. Anytime I would feel like I needed to smoke weed, I would take a super hot shower. Honestly, probably hotter than I ever would have liked before. And that would help calm me down a little bit, make me feel better. I would try to avoid negative media or thought patterns or circumstances. I felt much more able and likely to panic over something. So I tried to avoid things that would upset me or put me on some type of thought pattern that was really negative. And I noticed that helped a lot. Eating cleanly made a huge difference. I did end up seeing a doctor around the 3rd week because my heart rate and my blood pressure was elevated. So something that nobody really tells you is if you quit marijuana, you may experience an elevated heart rate, resting heart rate, and elevated blood pressure. And depending on how severe that response is, you may need a little bit of medical intervention. So I was prescribed a beta blocker, a very low dose beta blocker to take for about 3 or 4 weeks while I was coming off of weed and steroids. And I took it for about a week, and then I realized I kind of wanted to challenge myself to see if I needed it. I didn't want to develop a new chemical dependency. So I stopped taking it, and I still have some of them, but I haven't been taking it. And I realized it was prescribed to me as a kind of anti-anxiety medication and to take as needed. So when I didn't need it anymore, I stopped taking it. And the doctor did want me to look at getting on SSRIs I think it was Lexapro, as soon as I finished. And I decided not to do that. I feel comfortable navigating this without that. So for people that need that, more power to you. But because of my experience with drugs and what it felt like when my body turned on me and I started throwing up out of nowhere and I felt like I had food poisoning, that's what kind of triggered all of this. Is I had to go to the hospital. I didn't know what was doing it, if it was the weed, the steroid, what was happening. And it turns out that it was kind of a combination of the both. So I just dropped them both and I feel much better. And knock on wood, it has never happened since and hopefully will never happen again. So, I'll be honest, when I got home from the hospital, I did try to smoke weed again. And for about 2 hours, it made me feel really good. And then I felt worse than I've ever felt. I felt extremely anxious. I felt extremely upset. I felt extremely panicable, that if I started thinking about the wrong things, I could potentially lose control of my mind. And I realized that if marijuana is masking that, and that's somehow building up and getting worse, sooner or later it is going to come out and weed won't be enough, right? And that's where if you observe my usage pattern, that's why I'm comfortable using the word addict, even though marijuana may not be addictive, because no amount of it was enough for me. When I was spending $400 or $500 a week on it, I would have spent more if I could have. It wasn't enough. So I also think that maybe I just hit a limit or a breaking point on the amount of THC I was trying to push through my body, and years of it without taking any type of a break. So, if you're capable of doing this and you don't have a medical scare happening, it might be better to taper down and get off rather than just jump off the way that I did. But my problem is I can't just smoke a little bit of weed. I can't just do a little bit of steroids. When I end up doing something like that, it snowballs and it gets out of control for me, because there was a different problem in my mind and in my life that I wasn't addressing that I needed to address. So to kind of recap, a specific wake up time, exercising twice a day, eating clean, hot showers, those things all helped me a lot. I did hit the sauna every single day while I felt like I was detoxing. And just a quick tip on how I like to use it is, when I use the sauna, I like to do 2 15-minute sessions. So I like to in my first session, drink a Gatorade. And then in my second session, drink a bottle of water. And you'll notice that first 15 minutes pushes all kinds of sweat and dirt out of your body. And then that second 15 minutes, you continue to push out sweat and oil and dirt. And then right after you're done with the sauna, I do think it's a good idea to hop in a shower and rinse off. Because if you just don't shower, then your body's just going to reabsorb all of those things that are still sitting on the surface. So I like to hit 2 15-minute sessions, drink a Gatorade and a bottle of water, because the reason why I don't just drink water is because there's salt in your sweat, and you don't want to deplete yourself of electrolytes and wash all of your electrolytes out. But I would do that every day on top of cardio, on top of lifting weights, every day. And I think it was good for me to get through that. And that's still a routine that I like to keep up today. So it's gonna feel weird. I can tell you right now, like, I felt weird. I felt like my heart was beating out of my chest. I felt like anxious. I felt excitable. I felt like not really myself. I felt uncomfortable in my own body. And that did take a little while to get past. But I can tell you, from my experience, the worst thing for me would have been if I got 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks into it, and then I smoked weed and that timer had to reset. If I started myself over again. So I'm very sympathetic of people who, feel like they're relapsing or they're teetering back and forth. And that's where I do recommend that if you stop, you stop. And, unless it's an extreme drug like benzos or a ton of alcohol, if you do the research, withdrawals are not going to kill you. You may feel like you're going to die, but you're not. So it's a mind game. It's a mind challenge that if you can win, you get a new level of power and comfort and security, where I can honestly tell you I feel better now with nothing than I've felt smoking weed over the last 5 or 10 years. I smoked weed probably for 16 years straight. I stopped really getting high after the first 5 or 6 years. I would just smoke weed to feel normal, I realize now, to feel not even as good as I feel now without it. So in hindsight, when I was smoking all that weed, I would also drink a bunch of coffee, so I wasn't tired all the time. So I only need a couple sips of coffee now, and I'm much more in tune with my body. I feel like I can feel in the gym if something's going to go a little wrong, because marijuana also doubles kind of as a painkiller. So as nice as that might be for somebody with back pain or knee pain or something like that, you're going to make it worse because you don't feel the signals that your body is trying to send you to have you avoid certain things. So, I'm much more conscious of my warm-up, of my form in the gym, of my cool down. And as much as sometimes I might catch a whiff of it and think I miss it, if I really sit down and my brain doesn't lie to myself, honestly, my life is a lot better without it than it ever was with it. And every single person that ever told me sobriety was the way to go, I have to admit they were right. You know what I mean? They did have the answers. They were right. You know what I mean? The same way that Kanye West might have sat there and looked at Sway and been like, how, Sway? You don't have all the answers. And now he's man enough to admit Sway was right. Sway had all the answers. I have friends who have been trying to tell me and show me about sobriety this whole time, my entire life. My mother is somebody that doesn't consume substances. She might not be stone cold sober, but she doesn't drink excessively. She doesn't advise doing anything. She might have one drink here or there and then tell me how much it was pointless, and she doesn't enjoy it, right? So that's where I have to be honest. There have been good examples and people around that I could look to and follow this whole time. And some part of me really was convinced that in my heart and in my identity, I was just the person that I got fucked up. I got high, right? I just believed that about myself. I was even proud of it in a sense. And that's where I can still listen to music about smoking weed. I can still watch other people do it and, not judge them and remember what it was like because, I've done that enough. It's like when I see somebody smoke a cigarette. If you knew me in college and high school and after college, I smoked more cigarettes than anybody. And now that I quit those and I can see that they're not a good thing for me, I don't judge people that smoke them. But anytime I think, man, I want one, I remember I've had plenty. I've done that. And it did nothing for me except damage my health, affect my mind, and take money and time from me, right? So quitting something like marijuana might not be the sexiest, flashiest. Everybody might not make it look as cool as people make it look when you do smoke. But the thing is, it's better. I honestly prefer it, and I wish I would have done it sooner. And it's not boring. It's not scary. It's not lame. It's not any of those things. I wouldn't have been able to afford this chest tattoo if all the money that I spent on it, I was still smoking. I wouldn't be able to afford the lifestyle that I live and the things that I enjoy now if all that money was still going towards weed, right? So it's an expensive habit. Your body adapts to it so quickly that it doesn't even really do anything after a while, no matter how much you think it does. You're just spending money and spending time and blowing smoke to feel normal, right? And that's not what the plan was for me. That's not what I wanted to be doing the whole time. So, I'm 70 days quit weed now. I have a clarity, a memory, a presence that I didn't have while I did smoke weed, and I don't regret quitting. So the thing that I would urge you to do is not wait till you have a health scare or until, the vomiting starts or things like that, because there is research that some people smoke so much weed, for some reason they just start vomiting out of nowhere. I can't explain it, but I do think it happened to me. So it's something to look at, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult, but there are harder things. You know what I mean? Losing a loved one is 1,000 times harder than quitting weed. You know what I mean? I'll tell you right now. So it's not the hardest thing in the universe, even though it is difficult. But your mind will play tricks on you. Your mind will tell you, oh, if you just smoke weed, all this will go away and you'll feel better. The problem is the weed is why you feel like that. You know what I mean? I was sitting there week 2, week 3. My heart was just beating out of my chest. And I was wondering, is this motherfucker going to explode? Like, is this it? Am I going to die? And that was that anxiety kicking in where some little part of me had to think to myself, well, if I am going to die, then thinking about it isn't going to change anything. You know what I mean? Like the doctor that I went to told me, if you don't have sharp chest pains and difficulty breathing, you don't need to go to the hospital. So I told myself, all right, that's when I'll allow myself to worry a little bit. But even then, if you're having a cardiac episode, the worst thing you can do is panic. So it became a new exercise where no matter what was going on, I had to learn how to calm myself and become calm without chemical aid. And that's what I think I used that for such a long time, and what it pretended to help me with. And the problem is what a lot of people will say is drugs work until they run out, or they work until they don't. And that's where, in my opinion, something that works is something that's going to be there for you when you need it, every single time. Every single time. So if you need something external to be calm, to be comfortable, to be yourself, that's not how you want to set up life and how you want to live it, I'm realizing, because this is much better than what I used to do. So sleeping may be difficult. Maybe your appetite doesn't fire right. Maybe you get angrier. Maybe you get sadder. Maybe you get afraid of things that you used to not be afraid of. But the whole point is, those are senses that you're not supposed to be numbing. Your body, your spirit is trying to tell you something that you should listen to, right? Imagine if every time Spider-Man had his spider sense go off, he was like, but if I take a big swig of whiskey or if I smoke a joint, that thing goes away. Is that a good idea? Is that going to help him in his life? Or is he turning off one of his superpowers, literally? That is something that we all look at and think that we wish we had. Well, I can tell you, you have a spider sense. It's your anxiety. You know what I mean? It's your fear. And if you're numbing that the same way that some people might unplug a smoke detector, you might need that thing to go off, right? So what it might feel like is you've lived in a house without a smoke detector your whole life, and now you've got an installed smoke detector. And this thing beeps once in a while, and you're like, man, this thing's annoying as fuck. What's more annoying? A smoke detector that works, or waking up with your house on fire and all your shit's burnt to the ground? You know what I mean? Because it might sound like an extreme example, but that's the two alternatives. That's the fork in the road that somebody needs to choose between when they numb their senses and instincts and memories and mask them versus bask in them. You know what I mean? So it's different when you go from masking your instincts and your senses to basking in them. You bathe in your fears, your anxieties, your angers, right? Your pains. But you get to a point where, the same way when you hop into an ice bath, at first it's freezing and it shocks you. Eventually your body warms the water up and you adapt to it. And by the end of that thing, it doesn't feel like when you hopped into it. This experience is very similar to something like that, where at first it's going to be shocking because it's a difference. But if you give your body the opportunity to adapt to it, and you really tell yourself, look, that plant is gone, that chemical is gone, so we need to find a new way to exist and live life without that, you will be glad you did, and you will be able to do it. The human body is miraculous in terms of what it can adapt to, respond to, and grow from, and learn from. Now, if you spend 20, 15 years teaching your body, like I did, look, you're going to have this plant to help you out, sooner or later, that might not work for you. But if you tell your body, look, no matter what happens, we are good with who we are and what we have, and all we need is food and water and air and shelter and all the things that we're supposed to need and have access to, right? Then your system rewires, and then rather than stockpile a big old bag of weed and a couple bongs so that I can't run out of that, you stockpile money, you stockpile food, you stockpile healthy relationships, you pile those things up to the point where you're happy. You know what I mean? Because let's go to the root of it. Most of us, at least I can only speak for myself, but the first time I smoked weed was so that I could feel happy, I could feel joy, I could be laughing, right? I could be enjoying myself with the world that I live in and the people that I'm around, right? The same way that first drink that I ever drank, that first shot of steroids I ever took, was so that I could try to enjoy something more. I'll be honest with you. And once you realize that those things are actually standing in between you and real joy, real love, and real fun, and real smiles that aren't fake, and real laughter, right? You can look into the mirror and meet yourself for the first time ever, rather than having that feeling in the pit of your stomach, knowing, who the fuck am I? What am I doing? Like, this isn't me, this isn't my life, right? So it's a big piece of reclaiming and taking it all back. That's what it was like for me. I'll never go back. I recommend that everybody do it the same way that back when I was smoking weed, I thought it was the best thing in the world. I would tell you, man, you should smoke weed, right? It's a beautiful thing. Well, the thing is, I realized this sobriety shit, it's a higher high without the lower lows. And once you get through that first kind of couple membranes and you break into it and you initiate yourself into it and you get past the hazing portion where nature's kind of hazing you into it, the same way that like a fucking fraternity or sports team has to haze the new members, you're going to be like, man, I'm so glad I'm on this team. I'm so glad I'm a part of this. I want to share this with people. It's a beautiful, fun thing, right? So I realized there's two types of people. There's the people that want to share poison with you, and there's the people that want to share antidotes with you. And the thing that's very interesting to me is, do you know where most anti-venom comes from for something like a snake bite? You got to study it and pull it out of the venom, right? So I truly believe that people like us who went into that world, got high, got fucked up, took the poisons, we have access to a certain antidote that somebody who's never lived it before doesn't totally and completely understand. So the same way that I might be able to help and encourage and be there for somebody that wants to quit weed, if you've never been gripped by it and then beaten it, it might be hard for you to help somebody. So my advice isn't to create a problem and then go and cure it. But at the same time, people like me or us need to be fair about the fact that maybe those ones that said no the whole time understood the cure, understood the antidote, and maybe had what we were looking for the whole time. Because I'll be honest with you, I can admit it. Most people might not be able to admit it or have that level of awareness. Some part of me always wanted somebody to come up to me and say, you don't need this, right? You don't need to smoke weed to feel good, to be happy, and to be cool. You don't need to do steroids to look good and feel good and be strong and be enough, right? So that's where sometimes when you smoke that weed, it feels like that hug that nobody's going to give you. Sometimes when you do that steroids, it feels like that power that you didn't have. But that's a lie, and that's a prop up. And the problem is when you get used to that, you get to the point where you can't feel that hug anymore. You can't feel that power anymore, and you go right back to what you felt like to begin with. But now you have to spend all this money and smoke all this weed. Now you have to take this injection twice a week to just feel like shit still, right? So I'll always say, if you're not a professional bodybuilder or that's not your goal, you have no business taking steroids. And I haven't figured out the answers, so I'm going to just, my personal opinion is, unless you're using it to treat something like seizures or, crippling pain or something that is truly debilitating, I don't know that marijuana is the answer, right? I can tell you, if you're like me and you're just using those things to feel good and, enjoy your life more, there's more to enjoy about life when you put those things down. Day 1 isn't going to be the most fun you've ever had, but day 60, day 70, day 80, day 30, day 90, you're going to have something that you didn't have before, and you're going to realize you didn't lose anything. Back when I was getting high or doing those steroids, I would think to myself, I'll never give this up. I'll never want to lose this, right? You can't lose something that isn't yours. So if that good feeling that came from smoking that weed comes from that, that's not really yours. You didn't earn that. That doesn't belong to you, and some part of you knows that. That's why it's temporary and then it goes away. If you have to take 2 injections a week to feel like a man, you're not. You're not, unfortunately. Because you need to be that without that. And the whole point is, if I'm happy without weed, why do I need it? If I'm strong and confident and like the way that I look and feel without steroids, why do I need them? Because what I'm realizing is after going down the rabbit hole and hitting the bottom end of those things will take from you what they pretend to give to you. Genuinely and truly. I made some decisions while I was high off of weed that were terrible decisions that now that I have a clear mind, I can tell you I would never make those decisions. Never. Yet somehow I did. You know what I mean? Even the decision to do the amount of steroids that I did that caused a problem for myself, that was me high off weed thinking and making those decisions. Oh, I'm going to up the dose. Oh, I'm going to try this and take this and do that, right? None of that would have happened. So I can't speak for you, but I can tell you what it feels like when you're kind of through the first couple rounds of it and you're clean and you're used to being clean, your mind cleans out and your body cleans out. It feels kind of like waking up from a dream or a nightmare where you wake up from a dream and you're like, what day is it? What week is it? Was any of that real? And you're like, what version of me was that? You know, have you ever had a dream where you did something or a nightmare and then you woke up and thought to yourself, man, I would never do that. How did that happen in that dream? I would never do that. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like a little bit, only you got to realize it's not a dream. All that shit really happened, you know? And now it's time to clean up the messes or get to work for real. Because whatever I thought I was working on that whole time, I was half-assing it. Whatever I thought I was, I actually am now. You know what I mean? And that's just growth. We live in a world where people are very tempted and pushed towards chemicals and drugs and a quick fix and a shortcut and a magic pill, right? But there's no greater feeling than the awareness that now I actually have the opportunity to get it right. You know? Sometimes that survivor guilt kicks in. You think, why do I get this chance when some people I loved died while they were high? Right? Why do I get this opportunity? But the whole point is you got to be grateful. You got to realize it doesn't make you better than anybody. It doesn't make you worse than anybody. This is just how it is right now. And you take that for yourself and you earn it and you enjoy it. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, because the second you really grasp it, the first thing you want to do is share it with people, because you know people need it, man. You know what I mean? So that's probably a good place to wrap this one up. I'd like to show you something, anybody that made it this far in the video. One thing that helped me a lot is basketball, man. I've enjoyed basketball quite a bit ever since I got clean. And I got myself some new basketball shoes. These are the LeBron 23s. Bought myself a ball. Got a gym membership with a court I have access to. Learned what time to wake up so I can show up there and that court's all mine, right? Because let's be real, I've been playing for a month. I'm not that good yet. But I say yet because every time I go, I watch myself get better. And my goal isn't to make the NBA. My goal is to have some fun with it and to get that joy and that release that I used to think something like weed or steroids gave me, right? But for whatever reason, I didn't even know how much I liked basketball because I was so busy smoking weed, doing steroids. That now I realize I really love the game. I love to learn about the players. I love to learn about the rules. I love to watch it at the highest level or at the high school level, man. You know, I love the game. So I wouldn't have that opportunity. I wouldn't have the money for these or anything. Now, let's be real. Those are the LeBron 23s. I got them for like $85. I'm happy with that. I feel like I got a deal because that's a $200 shoe. I don't know why this white color is discounted. Yeah, the red ones and gray ones might look a little cooler, but that's a beautiful shoe for a decent price. And I'm excited to be doing that, man. I have my shoe collection going at a level that I didn't have before ever in my life. I have things that my old brain would have pawned or sold or turned into cash so that I could buy that, $400 or $500 worth of weed a week, because that adds up fast, man. fast. So, I tried everything from being the plug to dating the plug to whatever you could think of. And it didn't work. It didn't work. No amount of weed was going to fill the hole in my heart, right? Wasn't going to do it. No matter what I thought it was doing. So now I'm finally throwing a little bit of sand, a little bit of dirt into that actual hole in my fucking heart. Some cement into it. And it's starting to fill in a little bit. I'm becoming whole again. I'm healing, right? It might be some scar tissue there, but it's not an open wound that I just dump salt into all the time. Because if I'm upset about something going wrong and then I get all high and I make another mistake, throw that on the pile of shit that bothers me, right? So I'm excited and grateful for the opportunity to get things right. Does it magically fix everything? No. But does it take one massive problem off of the table? Yes. That's a fact. If you have any questions, if your goal is to do that also, let me know. If you've had a similar experience, if you're farther than me, not as far as me, on the road, let me know. Part of the thing I've realized is I used to feel like smoking weed gave me people, right? I used to smoke weed with people and think, man, this is my family, this is my friends. And I met a lot of cool people smoking weed. But the whole point is now I meet a lot of cool people being sober, being clean, not smoking weed. And that's just as cool and that's just as fun. But guess what it costs? $0. Yeah. So I can save my money and spend it on other things. But that wraps up today's discussion. I'm about 70 days sober. You can tell I kind of lost count. I'm past the point of counting every day. I have a little calculator I could plug it into. I'm pretty sure today's 70, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm too busy working on things, having fun, living life, rekindling my relationship with my little brother, enjoying my pets, you know what I mean? Getting new tattoos, right? So, if I can do it, you can do it. Andrew Prometheus, out.